Tracy Graff is a communication, learning, and development coach and professional speaker with 20 years of team and project leadership experience, attained from high-level marketing and public relations roles with major international corporations. We're talking Disney on Ice. As the mother of a toddler, I can really appreciate that experience. She specializes in internal and external relationship development to unlock team potential and achieve goals. From Fuse, Igniting Communication, I'm excited to welcome to the stage Tracy Graff.
So much. Hi, thank you all so much. I appreciate you multitasking there with your food and the workbooks and all these things, so thanks so much. So, hi, I am Tracy Graff, and before we officially get started, I'm going to ask Eric, can you move the slides up there so that yeah, thank you. All right, so to get started, I am going to ask you a very important question. So get ready, all right. Have you ever heard the saying, here we go. Ready? Eric, sorry, Eric's messing with me here. Okay, there we go, Eric, okay. Can I click? There we go, okay. Have you ever heard the saying, the show must go on? Okay, yeah, that's not the important question. The important question is, have you ever thought about who fills in for circus performers when they're out sick or due to injury or whatnot so that the show can always go on? Anybody ever thought about that? Who fills in, huh? I did, okay? So I worked for Ringling Brothers Barnum Bailey Circus for over 10 years, and I wore a different hat every day. One day, I would wear the ringmaster hat. Pretty cool, huh? Yeah. Another day, I'd fill in for the lion tamer if they were out. Let me tell you, this was the most thrilling of the jobs that I ever had. Another day, I would stand up on that chair on the very top of that high wire act so that the show could always go on no matter which act needed my help. Pretty amazing? Yeah? Okay. Well, not in reality. That's not really a job, okay? But it felt like that way to me with my circus project management job that I had. So I really did work for Ringling Brothers Barnum Bailey Circus for 10 years, and I had to juggle just as much as that made-up role that I invented where somebody fills in for people for each act, because I was managing the project stakeholder relationships with so many different groups of people, from arena managers to the circus performers to operations crews, labor unions, ticket agents, customers, animal rights protesters, and on and on and on. Let me tell you, my favorite relationship to manage was when I had a 12-foot python in nothing but a pillowcase in the backseat of my car that was not happy about it being 5 a.m., neither was I, and we had to go on a media tour and take this python into radio stations. Wow, that was pretty crazy. But luckily, I was able to move on from that balancing act. And now I am the star of my own touring show as the CEO of Fuse Igniting Communication, an innovative training company. So I get to leverage my other non-circus talents, like workplace communication skills, pulling my employee development wagon into a wide variety of clients' arenas across North America. I still feel like I am performing amazing stunts because some of Fuse's workshops use artificial intelligence technology to simulate months of project experience in only the matter of a few training hours. Fuse's workshops equip people with the soft skills to lead their projects and organizations to success. And now, while this photo here makes me look very young, right? Everybody in agreement? Okay. So believe it or not, I actually have 20 years of experience leading teams and projects for major corporations such as Vail Resorts, Lifetime Fitness, Disney on Ice, and Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey Circus. And so while your job might feel like a three-ring circus also, anybody feel like that sometimes? Yeah? Okay. So I really did manage the circus, but we're going to talk about how your management experience can really benefit from how we interact with our stakeholders. And I am realizing I'm going backwards instead of forwards. All right, here we go. Go forward. There we go. So what we're going to talk about here is exploring 3 stakeholder engagement techniques. Also during our time, you're going to draft a brief plan for managing your project stakeholders, and we'll encourage you to ask questions and share your opinions about how positively influencing your stakeholders can help you achieve your goals. This is going to be a very interactive workshop, so I know you might need to chew a little bit and whatnot, but then we're going to ask you to raise your hand, or those that are attending from the virtual format, we're going to ask you to be typing your thoughts into the chat, and we want to hear from you. You also have that workbook that Madison mentioned here. Hopefully most people have that at their spot, or if you're attending virtually, you can download it from the portal. And we're going to go into lots of different activities during our session together. So we're going to jump into our first activity right away. So grab that workbook. Hopefully you have some writing utensil also. Or if you're attending online, you can just use a blank piece of paper and kind of write those type of things down. So our first activity is at the top of page 2 of your workbook. We'd like for you to write there the name of an important project that you're working on, either a potential or an upcoming or current project that you're working on. And maybe that's going to vary widely depending on what industry you're in. So for me, I manage employee and team development consulting projects. Some of you may oversee change management or systems integration, all kinds of different new product launches or whatever it is that you're managing. And note that if you're in between jobs, you could use a personal topic also. So maybe you're talking about your project is managing building that shed in your backyard or something, right? So everybody think of a project. We often have many projects that we're working on, but try to just identify one, because we're going to use that one project as our common theme to work on throughout this workshop. And go ahead and tell your table mates there what that project is. Share that. Or if you're attending virtually, type it into the chat so we can all share with each other, because we're going to continue to explore our stakeholder engagement strategies deeper throughout this workshop. I'll give you just a few seconds. Everybody share your project, okay? Okay, so hopefully everybody has a project in mind that you've shared now. And while we're finishing our sharing, I'll point out a not fun fact that according to Jenica, poor stakeholder project manager alignment is a big cause of project failure. Only 23% of respondents in a survey said that project managers and stakeholders were in agreement when their project wrapped up. Interesting, huh? So we're going to talk some more about our stakeholders here. So let's talk here, make sure we're on the same page about what are stakeholders. We're here to talk about stakeholders for a whole hour and a half, so probably want to make sure we're on the same page about the definition of this. Stakeholders are defined as anyone that can affect what you are trying to achieve. Stakeholders are everywhere, such as clients, vendors, partners, regulators, anyone that can affect your life or could be affected by your decisions. Does anyone think I'm crazy for having friends and family up on this list when we're talking about work projects for the most part? Anybody? No? Yeah, it seems like you all understand that even personal contacts can be stakeholders in our work life if they positively or negatively impact the mindset that we bring to work, or if they're affected by what we do, right? So we'll address later a process for identifying and prioritizing your stakeholders related to that project. Let's talk some more now about why stakeholders are so important. Raise your hand if you know who Warren Bennis is. Anyone know who Warren Bennis is? Just a couple, not really? Okay, so Warren was widely regarded as a pioneer in leadership studies. He was a scholar who advised presidents and top business executives around the world on how to become successful leaders. Bennis's core belief was that leaders are not born, they are made. Let me tell you, I was happy to hear this, because that means I still have hope to become the next Tim Cook someday, right? Yeah, okay. So back to Bennis. He said, achieving business objectives is often about getting the right people to support you. However, the chances are they'll either be inert or against you. Anybody know what inert means? We'll say, in this sense, inert means lacking the ability, strength, or desire to move or respond. Those inert people are the people who don't respond to your communication. They don't show up to your meetings or don't read everything that you sent to them. Anybody ever experienced any inert stakeholders? Anyone? Yeah. Yeah, probably all of us have at some point. So we're going to talk about how to wake them up, get them excited about our projects. All right? You ready to wake up those inert people? Okay. So also, Warren Bennis said, let's see, I think I'm missing the rest of my notes there, Eric, aren't I? Let's see. There we go, thank you. So Warren Bennis also said, change is most successful when those who are affected are involved in the planning. And in order to get anything done in an organization, you've got to get people aligned with your goals. Yes, does that resonate with people? Does that seem like some helpful quotes? Okay, yeah. I'll take your silence as just chewing, right? Okay, all right. So what we're gonna do is bring this to your real world. So we are gonna ask some people to stop chewing for a little bit and come onto microphone here, because we're gonna have a discussion based on your experiences about why it matters to engage stakeholders. We want to hear from you about the 3 questions that are on page 3 of your workbook. And you can also journal your answers there so you remember what we discussed here. So I'll read out these questions, and then when you're ready to share, go ahead and raise your hand. We've got some volunteers around the room, I think, hopefully, that have some microphones. I see some microphones madly getting handed around. Okay, and then those of you that are attending virtually, you can also type your thoughts into the chat, and we have an awesome volunteer, Jason, who's going to be sharing your thoughts on microphone if anybody virtually wants to comment. So our first question is, how could stakeholders not being involved early in the planning process affect your project outcomes? Our second question is, how could a squeaky wheel derail your progress? And our third question is, how could stakeholders not being fully supportive of the vision impact your project results? Now, we want to hear from you all, and remember those quotes that Warren Bennis said. Remember, change is most successful when those who are affected are involved in the planning, and in order to get anything done in an organization, you've got to get people aligned with your goals. Anybody ready, willing to share on any of these thoughts here? Do you see any hands go up? See some back there, it looks like. While we're waiting for the first microphone to get to our first audience member, I'll tell you that I learned Bennis's philosophy the hard way in my career when I was a young manager. I thought I was supposed to set the direction and dictate others to follow it. However, I found that my team members were then resisting my plans, or sometimes even flat out taking a whole different path. And I had to figure out this Bennis philosophy really quick and realized that, oh, I need to involve both my internal and external team members early in the planning process to get their buy-in. And then I found out that they were much more likely to support my ideas, and our plan was a much more well-rounded plan because it wasn't just from my point of view only. I had everybody else's point of view from the very beginning. All right, I think we see way at the back there was somebody that was going to share, and there's also got somebody at the front.
So you want to question?
We ready? We're starting with back there, it looks like. And then if anybody brings a microphone up here, our lovely guest in the red shirt up here later will be able to share.
I was saying, do you want the answer to the first question that I have?
We'd love you for a comment on the 3 questions that are there on page 3, any of your experiences that you've had.
My answer is almost the same for all of them. It's about scope, schedule, quality, and cost. For example, parts of the schedule could be, parts should be included in the scope, and it's not because you didn't get everybody's input from the beginning, as an example.
Yes, that is wonderful. And I love how you say it could be in the answer for all 3 of the questions. Exactly. That is relevant for all of them. Thank you. Yes, we'll share here.
Yeah, so I'm on a long-term project that wasn't supposed to be long-term. And because of the term, the stakeholders have turned over. And so one of the things I ran into is that with new stakeholders coming on, I'm operating from an original set of business requirements, and some of the new stakeholders are developing software based upon whatever requirements they come up with. And so part of our disconnect then has been going back and forth saying, well, this is what it needs to do. Oh, I didn't know that from the stakeholder.
Were they inert maybe and they just weren't listening? Is that what? No?
Yeah, because I had sent them the original requirements, and yet they still went ahead and started developing things that we've had to go back and refactor because of having to follow the original requirements.
And what long-term negative results is that going to have, do you think?
Well, the negative results that it has had is that a lot of old code that they tried to reuse got broken in the process, and so it's actually costing more to develop this functionality than it originally should have.
Yes, it costs more resources, time, and money if we don't get aligned at the beginning. Thank you very much. Anybody else want to share with any of these? I see way back there, Carol, I think by you. Yeah.
So I'll just go on the squeaky wheel.
Okay, thank you.
The one thing that it can definitely do is bog you down. So it's the whole question of who wins, water or rock. And so if you can just avoid that squeaky wheel or move them aside, you still have to listen to them, but they can really bog you down and you just keep going over the same thing over and over and over and over again. So there you go.
Yeah, and so what are the other negative results that happen if that squeaky wheel, if we do give them our time and attention? You can take the microphone back and let me know. What happens if that squeaky wheel gets the spotlight and gets that time and attention too much?
You end up in non-productive conversations. You end up being distracted from where you're actually trying to go.
Right.
So it's like this gentleman over here who said the whole scope schedule. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there, right? But if you have that vision and you stay focused on that vision, the squeaky wheel will tend to take you off into the wrong trail.
Yeah, and you can stop them from squeaking by saying, hey, remember we all agreed this is the vision. Your squeaks don't agree with our vision. We're getting into scope creep here because you're squeaking too much. Yeah. Thank you. Good. Anything anyone else would like to share before we move on from this topic? It looks like from our virtual attendee would like to share.
Yeah, I can share a few from our virtual friends. George shared the squeaky wheel for him that has political power has been very dangerous for him. And also Terry added, the squeaky wheel can distract and change supportive members.
Ah, it can distract and change them, did you say?
Yes.
Yeah, so you might have had a supportive member, but if you hear somebody squeaking too much, then it's going to maybe make them not be supportive anymore. Right, good. Thank you, Jason, for sharing from those on our virtual platform. So what we're talking about here is, oh, sorry, there's one more back there. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that it seems like the squeaky wheel is more of a symptom of the fact that they weren't involved earlier, a lot of times that I've seen. So I'm working on a project right now where management didn't talk to anyone on the front lines, and the entire system that they designed is not usable by the front lines. So literally having the people that were going to be doing the work not be involved caused a whole slew of issues and made the entire thing, unusable.
Oh, wonderful example. Thank you, Shelby. So yes, because if we're not involving those people at the beginning, they're not aligned with the vision, they might just go off on a whole different path like that. And it causes headaches and resource consumption and all kinds of things. So involving people as much as we can early and often. There's actually research that PMI did that said that the top 2 of 5 causes for failure in a project are inadequate vision and poor communication, right? Vision and communication are so important with our stakeholders. So as we've started here to point out some of our stakeholder challenges, let's delve a little bit deeper into that. So we're going to use those sheets of paper that you have at your tables there. Everybody has a 1 on the top probably. There's a 1, 2, and 3. And then those of you that are attending virtually have voting fingers because you can type a 1, 2, or 3 into the chat. When we talk through each of these different stakeholder challenges, let us know if you resonate with this stakeholder challenge as I read them out. So our first one, we'd love to hear from you. Raise your 1 if you are suffering from not having enough time to engage all your project stakeholders. Raise your 1 if that resonates with you. And those on virtual, type into the chat a 1 if you feel you do not have enough time to fully engage all your project stakeholders. Yes, look at all those 1s. Lots of 1s out there. Okay, you can lower that 1. And now we're going to look at number 2. So you've got a number 2 voting card, or those virtual could type a 2 in. If you feel that stakeholders don't value you or your team as much as you'd like them to. See a back table there all full of 2s. I see lots of 2s, yes. And so this is also in our workbook. There's a section for challenges in your workbook that you could be writing some of these down there. Our third one is stakeholders have different and sometimes conflicting agendas. Oh, I saw 3s shoot up all over the place there. Yes, stakeholders have different and sometimes conflicting agendas. Lots of 3s. I think almost everybody raised a 3 there. Hold on to those voting cards because we're going to use them for another activity later. So don't start using them as a napkin or anything like that, okay? So we all have many stakeholder challenges in our projects. And so again, if you would like to jot down in your workbook on page 3 there, you can write down some of these challenges, and some of these might be different. These were just the top 3 that we've had from different clients sharing them with us. Does anybody have another one they'd like to share? Anybody want to raise their hand and say another stakeholder challenge that you experience, or elaborate on one of these ones that's already here? Looks like we got someone over there. Carol, yes?
I actually have one.
Oh, good, okay.
I'm president of the board of directors for a foreign language immersion charter school. And we have a big project where we're trying to sell some of the property we actually own. And one of our biggest challenges is culture and language. So when you've got a large majority of your stakeholders, meaning families and even our staff, who don't have English as a primary language, that really creates some challenges for us, because how do you actually communicate what your project is, even though you may have enough time, which we do, even though you have the forum to communicate. It's just how you communicate so that you can get across to them. And so that's one of our biggest challenges, especially I would see that in situations where we might be dealing with virtual teams across the globe, where language and culture is a big challenge.
Right, so you have that kind of need to over communicate to really make sure that those messages are getting across. Yes, thank you for sharing that. Anybody else have another challenge that they would like to add? I see in the middle here also, I think, a hand being raised. Failure to identify the stakeholder. Oh, that is such a wonderful transition here, Shelby, to actually the next thing that we're going to be talking about, which is about identifying stakeholders here soon. So thank you. I think that is a great way to move on, because we all have such a wide variety of challenges. And let me tell you, I've helped clients from small businesses to Fortune 100 companies overcome some of these main challenges. I've also felt these challenges myself until I participated in our full stakeholder engagement workshop, where I learned that while our stakeholders may have different or conflicting agendas, I could prioritize and engage them to overcome all these challenges. So that's what we're going to talk about, is how do we identify, prioritize, and engage all of our stakeholders. And if we do this proper stakeholder engagement process, we are going to be able to cultivate support from key people at the right time, influence and build consensus quickly, collaborate effectively, and minimize conflict. How does that sound to you? Everybody want to accomplish this with their projects? Yeah? Yeah, good, okay. I gotta be careful shouting here. Okay, sorry. So the process that we recommend to do so, that I just gave a little sneak preview of, is identification, prioritization, and engagement. So we want to identify who are our key stakeholders. And like Shelby mentioned there, that was a major challenge, was forgetting about finding out who some key stakeholders are. Then we want to prioritize them in rank order, and then, of course, engage them. And you don't have to be the leader of a large team for these steps to be truly beneficial for you. You could use stakeholder engagement processes even if you just have an influential role in a project where you're a project member, but you can influence others. And whenever we need to gain the support of others in order to achieve our objectives, this is the process that we want to go through. And so while some of you might feel like this seems like, oh yeah, I already know how to do this, this is a simple process, you might be familiar with this, we're going to be providing you with a comprehensive framework so that you have a step-by-step guide to ensure that you're covering all the essential relationship management steps necessary for your project to succeed. All right, so that we can problem solve together, because practice makes perfect, right? We're going to talk about a specific scenario together. We're going to give ourselves a case study that we're all going to work together here, which is the case study that we use in our full stakeholder engagement workshop that has some simulated gamified learning stuff. So I'm going to ask you all to close your eyes. You might have to stop taking a bite of food for this, but I'm serious. Let's try to close our eyes, okay? We're gonna envision something here, all right? Okay, we're all going to envision we're in a hot, humid office with jungle sounds outside your window. And you are taking on the role of Chris Porin, who is the project manager of Gerard Mining Company. Gerard plans to sink a copper mine in an area of the Amazon rainforest. You, as the project manager for this mining project, need to propose a development plan which is both profitable and has the backing of Gerard's key stakeholders. All right, everybody feeling like you're in Krista's shoes? You're feeling the humidity? You're hearing the birds? Everybody? Okay. All right, you can open your eyes now. We're going to continue to reflect back on this scenario throughout this workshop to have a comparison of something to practice on. But you'll also be thinking about your stakeholders and comparing them to the scenario also. Some of you might be thinking, this is just too hard to envision. I don't have anything to do with copper mining in my job. But we've actually chosen this scenario of copper mining on purpose because it takes us out of our usual day-to-day. I'm guessing there's not many of you here in the mining industry, so we kind of purposely pick that. And it's also giving us a topic that's a little bit provocative because you don't need practice you don't need practice working on those easy workplace topics, do you? No? I think you know how to manage the easy stuff. So we're purposely giving ourselves a tough topic to work on here so that we can practice those tough situations and let the easy stuff go on the side. So earlier we defined what stakeholders are. And now we're going to work out how to identify them, like Shelby had said there. And so we're going to flip to workbook page 4 that looks like this on the screen. And we're going to think back to that project that you identified at the beginning of your workbook. And we're going to reflect on 3 different questions to identify your key stakeholders. So our first question is, who has interest in the success or failure of your project? For our case study scenario, we could identify Helen Klein, who is a responsible business council blogger. Oh, she didn't come up, but that's okay. Who is let's go back to that. So Helen Klein is a responsible business council blogger. She's someone who probably has interest in the failure of our copper project. She's established a rating system for environmental management of extraction projects. She is not a fan of mining in general, so she's probably going to be out to sabotage our project. Now, you all write down there on page 4 some stakeholder who has either interest in the success or failure of your project. Now again, for those of you that have a lot of experience, this might seem simplistic, but I really encourage you to still follow along with these steps because we're going to take this to a deeper level here shortly. So our second question here is, whose support do you need to maximize your project's success? For our case study scenario, we could identify Bruce Jackson, Garrard's majority shareholder, as someone whose support we really need in order to be successful. So again, think about who is your stakeholder that you need their support in order to be successful, and write that on page 4. After we get through our third question, we're going to start asking for some of you to share with us your stakeholders. So get ready again, those virtually to type them into the chat, or those in the room to raise your hand. And we, of course, don't want you to tell us their specific name. You know, don't say, oh, Sally Smith is my stakeholder. But tell us maybe their title or the organization that they represent. Our third question is, who has high influence over your project outcome? Some of you might be thinking, gosh, I think this is the same person for all 3 of these questions. However, I challenge you, I hear somebody say, yep, that's what I was thinking, yeah. I challenge you to think of at least 3 different people here who are key stakeholders in your project. Remember that stakeholder slide we talked about? There's loads of stakeholders. We all have stakeholders internally and externally in our projects, colleagues, customers, suppliers, even adversaries have influence over our project outcomes. In our scenario, our case study that we're using, Valerie Vidal is the CEO of the company that purchases 35% of our copper output. She probably has high influence over our project outcome. So write down who has influence over your project outcome. And now we'd love to start hearing from you all about who your stakeholders are. Again, just in generic terms, their title or the organizations they represent. Anybody want to share with us some of their stakeholders? And while we're waiting for our volunteers, I'll tell you that I had the same problem that Shelby mentioned about identifying stakeholders. When I was a corporate big shot at Vail Resorts, I went into managing a new ski area that we purchased that had previously been owned by a family for 50 years. My 33-year-old self at the time thought, I got this all figured out. I know who's important and who's not. And I did not think that the former owner's daughter, who was forced on me as my marketing manager, my local marketing manager, was very valuable. I disregarded her because she had a forensics degree, yet she was the marketing person, and she had no marketing experience. And I thought, this person's not valuable, right? I did not realize that I really should identify her as a key stakeholder because of her strong connections to other people in the local community. So maybe anybody else trying to think now, ooh, gosh, there's somebody that I'm missing that maybe they don't seem like a key stakeholder, but because of their other connections, they really are. Okay. Anybody want to share a stakeholder with us? Looks like Jason's getting ready to come on mic over here, are you? From the virtual group? He's thinking. Oh, yes, up here, yeah. Mm-hmm. I think Carol's coming with a microphone. Sorry if I can't see everybody raising hands too, it's a little hard.
Well, as I kind of said before when I talked a little bit about my project, I think one of the key areas that has influence over the success of my project is our development team. So definitely need to keep good relationships going with them, because if they don't, if things go south with them, they're not going to do the work I need them to do.
Yes, and I love how you point out that it could be a team of people. We might have individuals, we might have teams, we might have a couple people, those types of things. Yes, thank you very much. Anybody else willing to share their stakeholders with us? Yes, over here. Oh, Carol, you want to turn around? Oh, well, I could hear you and I can repeat if you don't mind. Carol, can you? Oh, over here. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So my key project is rolling out another manufacturing line. So some of the key stakeholders that I've identified are the current team at the manufacturing plant. They have to have buy-in for adding this new equipment and following the procedures and all that, as well as one of the key suppliers. If they don't deliver on time and we keep them happy, then it all doesn't matter.
Yes. I love both the internal and external examples there.
And then the one that came up on the last page too on this one is we had a key customer suddenly identify themselves late in the project, and they might change the entire scope and we have to redo everything.
Yes, customers, suppliers, team members, all of those are great people to identify as key stakeholders. Thank you. Did you have somebody else you wanted to share, Carol, you were pointing at?
Yep, someone right there.
So when I think of projects, I always think of who are my sponsors, right? Who is creating the vision? Who is providing the backing for this project? And then I try to look downstream and identify who are my customers. Who are the people who are going to be impacted most by this? So I'm looking as far upstream as I can to those sponsors, and then look as far downstream as I can to see who those are impacted on my customers, and then scan in between and try to find those stakeholders in between.
Oh, I love it. I love the upstream, downstream analogy also. Great. It's good to look in all directions there. So when you have more time, we recommend you think about this a little more. You look upstream, downstream, you really get a full list of stakeholder names. And if you have created a full list, you're probably going to find out that you have too many stakeholders for you to be able to deal with everyone fully. Remember back to that challenges poll we did? A lot of you said you didn't have enough time to deal with everyone fully. So what we're going to do is we're now going to talk about a process to be able to prioritize our stakeholders so that we can figure out who we should be spending time with the most. So in our full stakeholder engagement workshop, we utilize this power interest matrix to help prioritize your stakeholders. So we have listed here both the power or influence on the left axis. So do they influence many outcomes or many other people? That would determine if they're high or low on that left axis. The bottom axis reflects the level of interest or stake they have in our project. Do they care about many aspects of our project? That would indicate they'd be high to the right. Or do they only care about one aspect or none about our project? They'd be far to the left then. So this produces the following 4 categories. Priority 1, which we want to manage these people closely. Priority 2, we want to keep them satisfied. Priority 3, we want to keep these people informed. And priority 4, we want to just monitor them. That's all we need to do with those people there. So the goal is to have max 10 to 12 stakeholders in your priorities 1 to 3, where it takes up your time communicating with these people. The just monitor 4, you don't really have to spend much time with them, right? So I'm going to describe one of our case study stakeholders, and then we'll ask you to use those voting cards to vote, again, which quadrant you'd put them on. And you'd start thinking about your stakeholders here also, because that'll be the next step, is putting your stakeholders into the quadrants on that workbook page 5, I think it is, right? Yes, 5. So the first stakeholder we're going to vote on here, so get our voting cards ready again, is Valerie Vidal. Again, as we mentioned on the last slide, she's the CEO of Green Copper. She is our biggest customer. So she's going to be sensitive to any decision that could affect the mining industry's reputation about being environmentally friendly or not. And again, she's purchasing 35% of our product output. So raise your voting cards if you'd put her in 1, 2, or 3, and those attending virtually, type in the chat a 1, 2, or 3. I'll just tell you we're not going to have anybody in priority 4 here because we don't have that polling card, right? Okay, I see a lot of ones, a couple 2s, a lot of 1s, a couple 3s. Yes, 1 is probably where we'd want to put her because she cares about many aspects of our project, not just the product, but also the environmental impact. So that puts her high to the right. And then she could also make or break our success because she could take her business somewhere else and go buy copper from somebody else. So that puts her high on the left axis also. So we want to really listen to her and try to deliver on what she wants. So again, while we're doing this for our case study examples, try to start thinking about those people you identified on the last page as your project stakeholders and start placing them on page 5 as to where you would put them in your priorities of the power interest matrix. So our second case study example is Bruce Jackson. And so Bruce, again, is our majority shareholder. He manages more stock than anybody else does with our organization. However, he only cares about one thing alone: profit. That's all Bruce cares about. Anybody want to do a vote here for us? Where would you put Bruce Jackson based on what I told you there? All right. Yes, I see a lot of 2s, yes. So we would put Bruce in priority 2 here. He's important and influential, but not that interested in our project details. So we just need to keep him satisfied. Now again, in your book, try to think about who's your priority 2 or priority 1 that you have to start filling out page 5. Now, finally, we have Helen Klein, our corporate responsibility conference organizer and blogger. She is highly interested in the social and environmental impacts of the project, and she wants to partner with us, whatever that means exactly. But she's only one of many media voices out there. How many bloggers are there in the world, right? So there's no indication that she's particularly powerful. Now, I won't make you raise up your 3 cards here, because I think it's pretty obvious we'd put her in priority 3, right? So she is someone we just need to keep informed. Do you agree with that? Does that sound about right for Helen Klein? Okay. Now you think about who are your priorities 1, 2, and 3. So go ahead and fill out that page 5 if you haven't already, and identify your ranking of your stakeholders. Really make sure you identify at least one person who is your manage closely, priority 1, someone with high power and high interest in your project, because we're going to be revisiting them later. All right? So we'd also love to hear from you how you identify that someone is a priority 1. So get ready to share here again. If anybody would like to either raise their hand or type into the chat with our virtual attendees and tell us, how did you indicate that one of your stakeholders is that manage closely category? Anybody willing to share that with us? While we're having people think about that, I'll tell you a little bit of my story, and then we definitely want to hear from you. So remember that person I said that I almost did not even identify as a stakeholder, who was my local marketing manager that was the daughter of the former ski area owner. It's hard to say, ski area owner's daughter. So she had very high interest in the project. She had lived on this resort her entire life. Her father's legacy was being taken over by some big corporate organization, and she was a prominent figure in the local community of only 3,000 residents where the ski area was located. So she was high on the right side of interest, right? However, she had very little influence over the other 4 million residents in the metro area that we were trying to be pulling our customers from. So I was probably going to put her in that priority 3, because she was pretty low on the power, but high on the interest. And I definitely needed to stay engaged with her. I definitely needed to tell her that I valued her opinion, but she was not going to be the top of my list like someone else who has a wider sphere of influence. All right, anybody ready to share with us how they identified? I see in the middle there. Anybody else? Yeah. Looks like the microphone's coming around.
Hey, Tracy, I would love your help identifying.
You'd like my help identifying, did you say?
Loud, so I try not to.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely on. Oh, okay. I'm really loud, so I'm trying not to overpower the mic. So I'm working on a transformation project where we have 3 departments mainly involved. One department is giving up work to the other 2 departments. It's very unclear based off of how this was set up, which was not set up as a project. I should also start with that. That's why there's so much hairiness going on. So I'm having an issue identifying who that priority 1 is.
So you're saying it is a project, just nobody's identified as it a project, so nobody's identified a leader. Is that right?
And there is someone who is leading the transformation that has never been introduced to any of the people that are actually transitioning or relaying the information regarding the transition.
Yeah. So I think I would reflect back on those questions on the page 4 about who there has interest in the success or failure of the project, Whose support do you most need to be able to maximize this project's success? Who has high influence over your project outcome? And then something that's not on here is also who's mostly impacted by the effects of the project also, because that tends to be somebody who can have high power or influence. And then, of course, thinking about on that power interest matrix, who affects the most other people that might be one of those categories of those that you identified also.
So in this scenario, I think that, I have identified many on all of the other categories. Essentially, I guess one of my questions is, one, do you consider the people who are actually implementing, doing, or, because the way that this is right, so it's management managed closely, right? Mm-hmm. In the area where management is aligned, they don't really know what they're aligned on, but they're aligned that this is the process they're going for, and we're gonna go full steam ahead. Mm-hmm. And no one's come out in front, then the only people left to kind of figure it out are the ones on the front line. Mm. So in my head, when we're talking about the success of the project, managing the people who are actually doing the work and their managers are, to me, at a higher level than
yes.
the directors.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. That's why we want to really think about this deeply, because it's not just by title alone. It's not just because you have a big title makes you the most important managed closely. In your example, I agree. I think that it's probably the people that are doing the work will make or break the success of it. So that would probably be the people you'd want to have the most communication with, which would be your priority one section, right?
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
I love, Jeffrey had told me that whoever's gonna call you and yell at you, or whoever's gonna give you the promotion at the end, and I love that, but it just doesn't apply to this project.
Yes, that applies to a lot of projects, but not all of them. So that was a great example of a unique project. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Looks like, oh.
Hi there. I'm actually in the position where I've changed the culture of the organization that I'm in. I moved from a very agile entrepreneurial culture to academia, where it's about as traditional as it can be. A lot of the titles say that. And the thing is that I have to look at who benefits the most in this political environment and has the most interest in terms of the positive outcome or negative outcome. And for me, understanding that interest takes a lot of fact-finding and figuring out kind of who's who, but you have to really survey and talk to those who have been there for a while and find out what was the reason for this change or what are the goals and objectives. And because it's political, it can change very quickly. I would also say that if you have a project where you don't know who the sponsor is or who's benefiting the most, that might be one of the most important things for you to figure out.
Yes.
Because that person exists, or if they're no longer there, you may have a funding problem coming up.
A funding problem, did you say?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. We need to know who funds us, who is in charge of the purse strings, and they definitely should be on our key stakeholder list, definitely. And good luck with that transition. It sounds like a big transition from into academia. So thank you for that example. And I think there was somebody else that was right next to Shelby that was raising their hand. Also, Carol, if you want to, yeah, there we go.
One of the people that you identified earlier is not mentioned, and I'm curious, where would you place an adversary?
Ooh, yes, thank you. That is a wonderful question. So it depends on the level, the adversary's level. So actually, Helen Klein here is an adversary. She is a protester, essentially. She does not like mining. So that's why we have her where she is, because we're not quite sure about her level of power because she's a blogger, but there's so many bloggers out there. So, but if somebody was a really influential blogger of some sort, then we certainly would put them higher, if they have a big media voice. This workshop was actually put together originally by the INSEAD Institute in Paris after the Brent Spar incident, if anybody's familiar with that. It was when Shell Oil Company was decommissioning an oil rig, and they were having a lot of protests from Greenpeace. And they just completely ignored Greenpeace. And they're like, you're just an adversary. We don't need to worry about you. And turns out they should have actually had them high on their stakeholder list and been managing the relationship, because then they would have told them that actually the way we're decommissioning this oil rig is the most environmentally friendly way possible. And if they would have been communicating that, Greenpeace might not have caused such a stir as they did. So yeah, adversaries definitely have their place depending on their level of power. Thank you. All right, let's move on to our next step. So we've done a lot of identification, we've done a lot of prioritization. Now we're going to move on to actually what is our third and most important step, is engaging our stakeholders. So before we, though, can successfully engage someone, it's helpful to understand what influences their opinions and decisions to know how to motivate them. So this iceberg model is listed on your page 6 of your workbook, and it's displaying that on the surface, it usually appears people make decisions for rational reasons. However, our behavior is also influenced by deeper social and emotional factors. Humans tend to make most decisions based on our heart, gut, or influences from others. And then after we make our decisions, we devise some rational explanation to justify the decision. Anybody ever done that before? Yeah? Anybody ever heard the saying, we are not rational beings, we are rationalizing beings? Okay, so it's a fallacy to believe that you can make someone do something for rational reasons alone. If so, we would probably only have one type of automobile with 3 sizes of the same car. So workbook page 6 lays out the decisions that might influence how we make a purchase, like something like a new vehicle. So it says on here that there might be rational factors that would help us choose a vehicle, like, oh, it has really good fuel consumption or low emissions. However, below the surface, something that we might not really admit to someone until we really get to know them, there's probably some social factors going into this decision also, such as maybe it's also impacted by what our friends and family are recommending. Or there's also even further deeper down some emotional factors that might be going on, such as just, well, I feel cool or exhilarated when I drive this car, right? We're probably not going to admit that to people unless we really get to know them. So I'm going to tell you about one work example, and then we're going to explore a situation together. So when I was a director at Vail Resorts, I needed to select which new digital agency we would contract for the 3 resorts that I oversaw. And so if I was to describe to someone that I didn't know very well yet why I chose this particular vendor, I'd probably only tell them the rational reasons, like this vendor met the features, service, and budget requirements. However, below the surface, there were other reasons that affected how I made that decision, which I probably wouldn't admit to someone until I really knew them well. So the social factors that influenced my decision were that some other friends had used this vendor and recommended them. They spoke highly of this vendor, and so because of that personal endorsement, I considered this vendor more credible than someone who I didn't have a social connection with. And the emotional reasons that also came into play were things like I just felt a positive connection with this customer support team in our initial meeting. And me having some type of gut feeling that I could trust these people with my project was not something objective that I could check off of a list. And so while they also had to meet the RFP requirements, the fact that we just hit it off was truly the deciding factor for me. Okay, so now we're going to envision a situation here together. Because what we're talking about is we're thinking about how we can't just use rational reasons alone to engage people. So we're going to really delve deep into a scenario here. And we're all going to envision something here together. Remember, we're in a copper mining situation. So let's all imagine together that our project is a month ahead of schedule. Okay, we know that's too hard to imagine. That's silly, right? That would never happen. So all right, never mind. Let's envision something else. Let's envision our project is a month behind schedule. Everybody envision that? That seems more realistic? Okay, so we've got our project a month behind schedule. Now, let's start hearing from you on the microphones here again, and those in virtually, type it in the chat. What are some rational explanations that we could tell our boss about why our project is delayed? Got one up here. Carol's running up to you with the microphone.
Everybody's favorite response right now. Oh, it's due to the pandemic. It's due to COVID. Everything's delayed. It's okay.
Yes. There's a worldwide pandemic. All the shipments are delayed, all the whatever. That's a rational reason. Yeah. Any other rational reasons anybody wants? I see one over there. See a microphone coming with a pink sweater.
The weather?
The weather, there was a snowstorm, everything was backed up or whatnot. Yeah, or maybe it was just too sunny, we couldn't see. No. Yeah. All right, so we've got lots of different rational reasons. Maybe, the IT team failed to get the certain things set up, or all kinds of different things. Now, what if we really trusted our boss and we had a deeper relationship with our boss and we were willing to tell them those below the surface reasons why things were happening? So can anybody tell us what could maybe be some of the social factors that could delay our project? Let me think of some social impacts. I see you back there. Yes.
Just gonna say everyone's burnt out.
Everyone's burnt out. I'm tired of working with these people. Yeah? Good, thank you. Any other social I see over here?
Yeah. Rational answer, oh, it was really complex to do this in the pandemic. Social answer, my priorities have changed in the pandemic. I do not care about this much anymore.
Yeah, and while you're there, you want to go for an emotional reason too? You have another one?
Emotional answer, I'm angry that I have to do everything at home by myself.
Ah, yes, the being at home. Yes, anybody else have any other emotional ones that you'd be willing to admit if we went really deep down? Anything else? I mean, this pandemic's caused all kinds of emotions, hasn't it? Yes. Let's see, I think we have another emotional explanation over here. There we go.
Yes, sometimes a project doesn't always align with your moral values, as well as just some of your values in life and how you want to perceive things in the world.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad you went there about values. That's something that we're going to talk about a little bit more here. Some of you might have been saying, I don't want to have anything to do with this copper mining project here, right? This is not aligned with my values. But then we have to think about certain things like, do we like to talk on cell phones? Do we like to use computers? Anybody like to maybe sometimes get on a plane to travel? Because all of those use a lot of copper, right? So we get pulled in a lot of different directions depending on what our values are. And that can be an emotional journey, really trying to decide where am I going to go with my personal values or with what my job is requiring of me. So it would be really great for us as project leaders to be able to understand the full picture, right? Not only just the tip of that iceberg with that rational reason, but understand our whole picture about what's going on with how our stakeholders are making their decisions. So we're going to bring this back to that copper mining project scenario. So we're all feeling the humidity again. It's warming back up here again. We're going back down to the Amazon. And we're going to talk about some decisions that could be easily made with rational logic alone, such as we could decide to underground mine, which is very expensive, or we could open pit mine, which is much more profitable. Well, which one sounds like the rational decision here? Open pit, which is just more profitable, or underground, which is more expensive? What do you think? Open pit, right? Yes, thank you. That would be the rational decision because it's more profitable. However, we have projects that are conceived just alone on paper sometimes, and those only have the rational factors figured in there. And that might be based on things like ROI or problem solving. Then sometimes we need to figure out that non-paper part of the plan about what are we actually going to do to engage and motivate people to implement our plans. Because stakeholder opinions are not in silos alone only about things like revenue. People care about other aspects also. And while underground mining is more environmentally sensitive, it's also more dangerous for the workers. So depending on what your stakeholders' social and emotional opinions are, we could have decisions varying from using our budget to donate money to the local schools, to be able to build a good relationship with the community, to installing air conditioning to reduce the lung disease for our workers, to installing a filter to reduce the river pollution, which is pretty affordable but not that effective, to building a whole plant to very effectively reduce our river pollution that's very expensive. Lots of decisions are made. And so we want to think about how in our interactions with our stakeholders, we can't only be thinking about one aspect. We can't just think about that rational tip of the iceberg. Could you imagine if you rolled out a plan that was drawn up by only the finance team that had no social or emotional factors included in it? Would that be successful? Probably not, right? So while the rational, profitable decision may be to open pit mine in all of our plot options, if we do so, we would upset many stakeholders because open pit mining destroys the plot that is home to various people and species. So this leads us to that considering things about lives that are affected by our project, going on this emotional journey. Anybody have certain emotional things that you have to make decisions about in your projects? We probably all impact somebody's lives with our projects in some way. And there's not going to be one right answer. So we're going to use our polling cards again, or for those attending virtually, they're going to vote in the chat 1, 2, or 3. When I describe to you our 3 different options for where we are going to open pit mine. Remember, open pit mining completely destroys the plot, and underground mining does not. We can only afford to underground mine in one of the 3 places. So we can only save one of our 3 options here. So you're going to decide which one would you save if you could only save one of these. I'll give you a short description of them, then you'll vote. The first one is the settlement plot that is home to a tribe of indigenous people who will be displaced if you opt to open pit mine there. The second option that you could save if you'd like is the parrot plot, which is home to the endangered parrot species who will become extinct if we open pit mine there. Unlike the indigenous people, the parrot cannot be rehomed. And then third, we have the rainforest plot, where there's lots of plants and trees that would be destroyed if we mine there, and animals would be displaced but not killed. Okay, so if you had to save just one of these, vote which one would you save there? Which one would you save of these 3? Oh my gosh. Jason, what are we seeing from online? What's happening there?
looks like a mix as well.
A mix, and just like in the room here, look at this. We've got 1s, 3s, 2s. Gosh, got a mix everywhere going. Yes, thank you. So that's what we're talking about, is that sometimes we make decisions based on our gut alone, and it's not always going to be the right answer. Based on what I saw here, about a third of you were going to be, well, about all of you were going to be wrong about 2/3 of the time, I guess I'd say, because we were split pretty evenly there. And so this relates to our own values, just like our guest over there was talking about with values. So where do our values lie? Some people would think only about people as the highest priority. However, those people can be relocated, and they're not going to die by being pushed out of their homes. Therefore, other people might prioritize the parrots, who would go extinct if we open pit mine in their area. Others might choose the rainforest because there's such a wide variety of plants and trees that would die if we mine there. And we can't use just our own gut decisions. Otherwise, we'd be wrong about 2/3 of the time in this scenario. So we need to listen to what our important stakeholders care about before rolling out our plans. So while you're probably not making decisions about saving parrots versus people's homes, you are probably dealing with many conflicting priorities, yes? I think we talked about that in our challenges poll also. A lot of you said that conflicting priorities are a challenge. So let's talk about that now. What are those conflicting priorities that you experience within your projects? Workbook page 7 has a section there that you could note those down. And we'd love to hear from you from examples of how are you pulled in different directions in your project. Go ahead and raise your hand if you'd like to share, or type into the chat if you're attending virtually. Most organizations have some corporate social responsibility goal and also a profit requirement. And those seem to be conflicting quite often, right? Yeah. Over there?
Sometimes it's organization values. So sometimes it's organization values and an organization priorities. So while my stakeholders might be in the same company, they may have competing priorities and I just can't get alignment, and it causes some conflicts either at the beginning or halfway through.
Yes. Would you be willing to share what some of those conflicting priorities are by any chance?
Well, some of it isn't it's not a normal conflict or a traditional conflict, but how we're organized can be divided on key focus areas. So how do you slice and dice it? Is it always about a particular topic or a particular audience? So it's finding that alignment for who are the decision makers for each thing. So it's how the group is even organized and what the responsibilities are that don't align up with nice, easy decision matrices.
Yes, so even though we're working for the same organization, and sometimes we think we have the same end goal in mind, it's like a GPS. Sometimes somebody's like, well, I've got to take this route because it's more scenic, and someone else says, no, we've got to take this route because it's faster, but it has the toll roads on it, it's more expensive. And so different people have different suggestions of how to get there. Thank you. Anybody else have any other conflicting priorities they'd be willing to share with the group? Anybody have different people you have to keep happy? Yes, over there.
Hi, yeah, really, I work for a school district and we build new schools, and really the biggest conflict is always schedule, right? So we have a fixed window before students have to be in the building. So if you're renovating a space or building a new one, it always boils down to schedule, quality, and cost, right? So you have your particular budget and you try to match that as best you can, but they'll crash it every time to get kids in the classroom on time. So that's, I don't know, the three biggest ones for us.
Yes, it was schedule, cost, and sorry, what was the other one?
Quality.
And quality, yes, because some people, like maybe a teacher, is going to say, schedule is the most important thing because we've got to have the kids in here, but they don't necessarily have the budget in mind because they're not the one managing the budget. So they have a different priority than the people that do manage the budget. Yes, and we have these different stakeholders that are representing different priorities. Okay. So hopefully you've all written down there on page 7 some of your conflicting agendas. And we all have high-stake projects with varying stakeholder opinions. And we want to think about prioritizing which of these various agendas are held by our number 1 and our number 2 ranked stakeholders on that power interest matrix. Because we want to find consensus by practicing putting aside our own personal opinions and really thinking about how can we communicate most clearly with those key stakeholders and take their opinion into consideration the most. And so the way we do this is by thinking about whose opinion is most influential with others and gaining their support to help us bring others into consensus. Because every time we build a new road or a building like a school, like we were just talking about over there, or we implement some new technology, we're gonna upset someone. We can't keep everyone happy all the time. So we wanna figure out who are those most important stakeholders that we need to build a genuine rapport with. And how do we do that? So we suggest that you ask those key stakeholders open questions. Instead of, do you care about the rainforest? Well, that's pretty, okay, yeah, yes or no. That's not gonna tell me a lot of information. Let's ask more open questions to reveal more about priorities, such as, what concerns do you have about this project? Or what are you excited about this project? To reveal more from our stakeholders. And we wanna figure out what are their priorities by seeking their opinion, asking their advice early and often to make them feel invested in the project's success. Remember, Warren Bennis said that we want to involve people early, right? We want to understand and listen to their concerns, really get to know what they care about, and incorporate their recommendations into our project decisions to make sure they feel valued. They're gonna be, in turn, much more likely to give their backing than if you simply peddled a hard sell without building a relationship with them first. Does anybody have a story to share with us about a time that you were able to win over a tough stakeholder by taking the time to build a genuine relationship with them, listening to their concerns, really caring about them? Or does anybody maybe have an example where you did not engage properly? Like my story about when I did not realize that I could benefit from engaging the former owner's daughter, who was my local marketing manager, by asking her opinion. Even though she didn't know anything about marketing, I could have found out a lot from her by really asking her open questions. And since she was so connected to others, she could have provided our team insights into our customers that I would have never been able to figure out from my office 1,000 miles away. Is someone willing to share that? Thank you.
Hey, at one of my previous jobs, I was the program manager for a technical set of programs. And I had a team, so my escalation point for my team didn't like my team. The second day I was there, he basically told me they were all stupid, and if I didn't fire them, I was stupid too. So,
wow.
So there was a particular incident that happened, and once I investigated it and talked with him, found out that he was rude to my team. He told them to do something that didn't have documentation, and then told them to Google the rest and hung up on them.
Oh.
So I asked him to put himself in my team's position. Would you want to call yourself back? You know, if you were talking to yourself like that, and he said no. So
good for you.
What I told him was that I envisioned for him and my team to have a great relationship, that if there was something new that came up, that he would show them how to do it and then create documentation. So the next time they had to deal with it, all he had to do was say, did you go through the documentation? And then if they say, yes, I did this, this, and this. And he goes, good, thanks. Transfer me over the call. And he said, you know what? I want that too. So one of the other things I did with him, because I needed to hire new people, oh, well, let me backtrack. He wanted me to fire people, right? I told him I needed to give them the benefit of the doubt. I needed to make sure they had the tools and experience and everything they needed before I started just letting people go. But I needed to see that. So I told him, I promise you, if I see that, you know, I will take the proper action. Just give me enough time. It was my second day. So what I did was I made sure that I included him on interviews for new people. So, you know, me and him can align on what he thought was a good candidate and what I thought was a good candidate. He loved that. And then come to find out, a lot of people did need to be fired. And so when after I let the first person go, I went into his office and said, I just wanted to let you know I let so-and-so go. His eyes got big. He was like, whoa. Oh, my gosh. Right, because they were keeping people that should have been fired a long time ago.
Yeah.
So then after that, he was my advocate, you know, and I told him I just wanted to make sure that he had enough time to go do other things because he was always putting out fires for my team because they didn't have documentation.
Oh, my
so
gosh.
after about a year and a half, we didn't have to call him, and he was able to do different things, so.
Wow, what a perfect example. I feel like we need to give her a round of applause. Wow, that was such an amazing turnaround story. I feel like I couldn't have asked for a plant better than you if I had planted you there, which I didn't, because that was such a great example of, she talked about how, okay, he was not happy. She started involving him early in the process. How much earlier could you involve them than the hiring process? That's about as early as you can involve someone in there, so she involved him in early. Also then when she took his advice, she went back and told him, I implemented your advice, I fired someone. And that makes them feel like, yes, thank you, I've been heard, you appreciate me. So sometimes we actually do implement somebody's advice, but we forget to go back and tell them, oh yes, I did do that. So that's a good thing to do, to remind them of that I did really implement what you said. So thank you so much. That was a wonderful story. I don't think we even need another story because that was just summed it all up right there. So we really advise that you spend most of your time here in this engagement process. Remember, our 3-step process was to identify, prioritize, and then engage. Of course, we can't really do that here in the workshop that much because your stakeholders aren't here in the room. So that's what we really want to recommend that you do, is that you go out and you spend this time asking people open questions, listening to them before you make major decisions. In our stakeholder engagement full workshop, we have a 3-month simulated project, and we recommend people spend 2 months of that 3-month project in this phase before they really dial in their plan, because we want to know what the most important people care about the most before we make these decisions, because that will help our stakeholders be in consensus with us for the long run when we're rolling out the project. So if you're leading projects, you're always going to be managing a series of trade-offs. There's not going to be a clear answer. And so asking your important stakeholders questions is going to reveal to you a path forward, the most effective path to find consensus. And so in our simulated interactions with our stakeholder in our workshop, it's like a chess game or like real life, where when you make one move, it changes how other people move. And so we all have different kinds of plays that we can make with our stakeholders, such as choosing when to communicate with someone, saying what to them, and via what communication medium. So this is going to be our last poll here. I know you're really sad that you're going to have to put these poll cards down after this, but this is our last voting opportunity to tell us 1, 2, or 3, which form of communication helps engage your stakeholders the most, building the strongest relationship. Number 1 is phone calls. Number 2 is meetings, whether they're in person or a video conferencing call. And number 3 is emails. All right, which one's most effective? What do we have? I'm guessing in the chat, what do we have, Jason? Jason's thinking.
There's a delay.
There's a delay, but we can see in the room 2, right? Okay, wait, I see some of you say 1. I don't know. I think 2 was the major majority there. Yeah, so somebody's got 1 and 2 up. Okay, yes. 1 can be very effective. Our phone calls can be effective. But our meetings are probably what's really going to help us build that true rapport with someone. If you can see someone face to face, you can gain more than just an understanding of their words. You can gain an understanding of their body language, their facial expressions, all of those things. And maybe even after a few meetings, you could get into that zone at the bottom of the iceberg where you're starting to understand their social and emotional influences. And you're going to be more likely to get them to support your endeavors and find that consensus. So take the time. It takes time, but scheduling those meetings are really going to develop that relationship and really engage our stakeholders. And the ultimate way to engage our stakeholders is to customize a communication strategy for each of our important stakeholders. So let's practice tailoring your communication to the stakeholder that you previously identified as your priority number 1. So you're going to fill out workbook page 8 there as we go along. And I know we are at the end of the time for this session, but we started 5 minutes late, so we're going to just quickly wrap up about 5 minutes after, and there's time before the next session begins. So while you're working on your communication strategy, I'll show you ours for our biggest client, Valerie Vidal. So remember, Valerie has high power and high interest in our project, which makes us want to manage her closely. So we also want to think about, what is our goal with Valerie? Well, it's probably to get her to fully support our project, right? And so we want to consider, how often should we talk to her? Probably pretty frequently. And what is our first step with her? It's to build rapport and trust with her if we don't already have it. And how do we do that? Remember, we just talked about how we could ask her for advice, ask her opinion, to make her feel valued. And then finally, we want to find out who else she's interested in, to understand her network of influence. So we could aim to impress others that are connected to her so that she hears good things about us, and eventually start really influencing her through that network. Just like we were talking about that squeaky wheel, someone said the squeaky wheel could turn supporters into adversaries. The same way goes here. If you have a supporter already, you could have that supporter amplify your message and get other people that are maybe adversaries on board with supporting your project. So this strategy will certainly adapt as we learn more about our stakeholders, but this is a good starting point. So we recommend that you spend more time on this than we've been able to allot here, and customize a communication plan to each of your key stakeholders that are there in your priorities 1 and 2. Those are the people we want to communicate with often. So just a quick recap here of what we've covered, that these 3 techniques that are essential to managing any project are identifying our key stakeholders. So we're narrowing down our stakeholders to a manageable number. And let me tell you, if I could, I would go back and tell my younger self to not try to juggle relationships with the entire circus and our external partners, vendors, protesters, etc. And I would also identify unassuming contacts as key stakeholders, such as that daughter of the former ski area owner. Again, hard to say. So are you identifying too many people as your key stakeholders and you just don't have enough time for all of them? We need to narrow it down. Or are you not recognizing someone who should be a key stakeholder? So that moves us into the second part, prioritizing our stakeholders. Use that power interest matrix that's in your workbook. Think about, is there someone like Helen Klein that I could relegate to just a 3rd keep informed level, because we don't have time to manage all of them. And then we certainly want to spend most of our time engaging our stakeholders, asking them questions, listening to them and considering their opinions, and really think about how we could take those challenges with our stakeholders and turn them into positives, just like our wonderful example that she gave us back there did. So if we do all of this frequently and really thoroughly, again, we will be able to cultivate support from key people at the right time, influence and build consensus quickly, collaborate effectively, and minimize conflict. And this results in effective project management. So we have a little bit of time before the next in-person session, so I'm going to stay here and answer some Q&A type of things for those that would like to. One question that we often get is, how can I experience this really cool full stakeholder engagement workshop that Tracy's mentioned uses artificial intelligence simulation technology to provide 3 months of project relationship management experience in a matter of few hours. This is in the back of your workbook that you have there. If you're interested in scheduling a private workshop for your group, or if you'd like to attend our public workshop, which will be on the mornings of November 3rd and 4th, we have a special 20% discount for you for attendees here that you can use the PMI SAVE code if you register by September 15th. And we also accredit other facilitators to deliver our workshops themselves if anybody is a trainer and you're interested in learning about accreditation. So we'll move into our question and answer now. I don't know if we should probably take it offline, and I'll stay over here on the side if anybody wants to come up here and ask questions. So thank you.